Unfortunately, for those of us who get tangled up in the system, it's like being in a spider web. Would you agree with me on that, sir? It's like a spider web. Once you're tangled in it, it's very hard to understand what's going on because you're wrapped up in the system. And the worst thing is that I experienced, my children were being held hostage. I never knew what a hostage was. You might have seen that movie with Mel Gibson when his son is taken away and he does anything to try and find the lad. The experience of the court for many people is that their children are being held as hostage by a system that we don't, in the beginning, we don't understand it. None of us understood how the system, the court and justice system worked when we went in that door. I certainly didn't. Did any of you? No. There is no, you're walking like a lamb to the slaughter. How many of you know in the freezing works have you heard about the Judas sheep? The sheep that's used to lead all the other ones so they'll be slaughtered. The Judas sheep is in many ways like the lawyers and the judges who pretend that everything's okay except our children. What on earth has a court got to do with a father or mother's love for their sons and daughters? What business does the court have in using law to overrule the natural relationships of parents and children? Surely there's got to be a better way. There is, ma'am, and I know we've got to offer solutions. I'll go to the solution in a minute. I think there is a way that we can handle this, but I do want to share with you a little bit more of my experience in the court. In the court I learned that there is a narrative, a story that everyone is going with. And the story in the court I experienced in Florida and Miami was somehow that mothers, in my case, have more rights than fathers. But in the end, the court awarded what they called shared parental responsibility. So we both got back into balance over our dispute between ourselves. However, when I went to visit my children, they were never there. The mother took them away. Now I'm sure you might have had that experience if the court awarded it to, say, a husband and you went to pick the kids up and they were never there. In other words, there's another game going on apart from the justice game, and that is human relationships. Probably we are at our most vulnerable when we're in a family and we have a dispute with our spouse or partner. But that is no occasion for us to become a sacrifice to lawyers and judges and social workers who all reap big money from the misfortunes of others. If you have any doubt about this, people, I'm sure there are people here who will tell you they've spent thousands and thousands of dollars and years of their life in the court system trying to sort something out, and yet this is adults' business. And the sad thing is, it should have nothing to do with children, but in the end, they are the ones who suffer the most. I had to see my children in circumstances that brought me virtually to tears, in a room with a video camera on me as if I'm some kind of creep. I'd stood for them for years. The only dispute and trouble was that their mother and I had struck a communication and a struggle between us. But I think we both agreed that the best interest of the children. But sadly in my case, she got into the hands of a female lawyer who hated men. Now that could be the other way. You could be in the case of a lawyer who hates women. There's both cases. I'm just trying to speak from my case down the middle. And the feminist narrative crushed the hopes of our family and turned my children into victims of the social workers who are busy analysing them and psychoanalyzing them and spending thousands of dollars of taxpayers' money trying to analyse my children. And what were they looking for? Something that didn't exist. They were looking for crimes that I might have done or beaten them or anything, and yet there was no history and no evidence. Because there was no evidence, the court had to abandon the persecution of me, but that took 4 years. I suppose you all know what it's like when you've got the court date and you're building up to it and your stomach turns to jelly, and on the way to the court you've got to stop at McDonald's to use the toilet because you've got diarrhea, because that's what upset how deeply it goes into you. You actually feel spiritually, physically and socially and mentally disturbed and really like you're on a rack being tortured. That was my experience. Lambs to the slaughter. Where's that Judas sheep I told you about? Now, you go to the court and then you find out it's been put off. The hearing's been put off for 3 months. For goodness sake, why? Oh, the judge had to go on holiday. The lawyer's too busy with some other business. He's making money somewhere else, right? Or, unfortunately in my case, my partner also used stalling tactics to try and wear me down. Because I was in Miami, far away from my home. And you know how difficult it got. I would be paying money to my partner for the children, and she would be spending that money on a bloody lawyer. The money that was meant for my children was going to pay for a lawyer. When I figured that out, I thought this has got to stop. But by then I was in the system. So if I stopped paying, I'm now a deadbeat dad. For goodness sake. You know, that's the other side of it. This is the most heart-rending story inside the family. And yet in New Zealand we have a real problem. Because in the name of the children, in the name of justice, our courts are doing us a tremendous disservice. The disservice is there. We are unsatisfied customers. In fact, if this was about, say, a car sales outfit, they'd shut it down because their cars don't work. Well, the courts are not working when it comes to helping children and parents. How many of us went to the court and thought we were going to get justice? Did anyone go there with the hope of finding justice? That was a bit like going into a bar looking for sobriety, wasn't it? I'm afraid the court doesn't deal in justice. The court deals in process and money and having to look good, and in a certain way it tries to conform to the government policies. But if courts were the way of family life, we'd be in a really good position.
Bigger than what it is.
Coming along.
Yeah.
Since they're not, they're actually accelerating the breakdown. We've got enough struggles in New Zealand to deal with at the moment with relationships without making the burden heavier. People are losing their trust of each other. The breakdown in trust is a very serious matter when it comes to relationships and community cohesion and unity. The greatest trust is that which exists between people who share the same values and the same purpose. But if we are bringing people into our nation who don't share our values and don't share our purpose, inevitably there's going to be conflict and breakdown. More of the same. And then that runs over into marriages, and then it affects kids. How can we stand for this sort of nonsense? When we have to come to the point, and this was my wake-up point. I was pretty naive when I went to the court, but by the time I came out, I guess I've been like all of you guys through a university course, shall we say. We graduated and we started to figure out, we figured out that we are not getting representation. When we go through these election processes for our government, remember we had one a couple of years ago, there's one coming up and we're all voting for these characters, we're not getting representation. Look at your banners here. They're not listening. There are no MPs down here listening to us. None of the social workers, God bless them, they're all overburdened. The justices, the lawyers, nobody's here sharing with us their concern. Think of all the thousands and thousands of hours of heartache and time spent in the court, struggling with all this stuff, when you could be with your kids, going fishing, skipping rope, having tea parties. All those things that you do with your little ones, all that energy and that precious time, those little ones, I understand, ma'am, anymore and I'll start crying. Seriously, it does hurt my heart. These little ones that need our time, they need our effort, and yet we're putting them in the machine like a meat grinder. In the end, the spiritual damage is beyond recall. Do you want to come on, Steve? Oh, okay, I'll just wrap up at this point. So my point, sorry? Well, the key thing is to create our own representation. Get behind people who've got the moral fortitude to represent your interests and back them and raise them up. That's how we have to organise. We can't go back to the old well where the water's already polluted. We've got to go and start looking for people of quality. I found Elliot, who's been here for free speech, a man of quality, people like him. Free speech is the next part of this business. Okay, I'll hand it over to Steve. There you go.
Hi guys. Hey, I'd just like to welcome everybody here today. This protest is part of an international global campaign across 17 countries. In Bulgaria alone, they've got 23 cities protesting, and we've asked some people to come along and speak because we've had enough of the abuse of Oranga Tamariki and the family court, and we've had enough that our bloody politicians got no ears on. And we're getting angry. And if you don't do something, there will be lawful rebellion. Magna Carta, Article 61 says we can rise up if we're being ruled unjustly.
Found something interesting.
And these family courts are lawless. The rule of law does not apply. And the perjury and corruption that has been dished out by those people from Oranga Tamariki makes them a pack of criminals.